Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We will start in just a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It is now 10:02 a.m., so I think we'll get started. We see a good chunk of people on, and we want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome to our Spring 2020 COVID-19 Student Survey results as part of the California Student Aid Commission in partnership with California Education Lab at the UC Davis School of Education. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, so if any of your colleagues or any of your communities couldn't have come and join us today to watch this video or this webinar, please let them know that they can check out this webinar and any of our other webinars on our website at www.csag.ca.gov under our News and Events tab. All participants and attendees, please know that your microphones are muted and you have no video access. So please submit all your questions throughout this presentation in our Q&A box located at the bottom of your taskbar. Only panelists and facilitators have the ability to answer any questions, which will be publicly in a written form or privately to the individual with the question. We may even take pauses throughout the webinar to take a few or a couple questions verbally, and then continue on to take more questions towards the end. The fun part, please check us out on our website, as mentioned, at csag.ca.gov. You can find more information about this student survey and the data and its findings at csag.ca.gov/survey2020. It is now live, and all the reports and related materials are available to be downloaded for your review. And follow us on Twitter. Please feel free to follow the California Student Aid Commission, or CSAC, at CA Student Aid, and the UC Davis School of Education at UCD Education. You may also follow some of our staff and the key members that made this project possible, such as our Executive Director, Marlene Garcia, and our Commission Chair, Catalina Cifuentes. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Marlene Garcia, to please provide the names of those who made all of this possible.
Thank you, Judith. And thank you everyone for joining us here this morning for this important webinar. I also want to recognize the team that has made this possible, and you'll be hearing from shortly, and the incredible work that they have done to bring this survey together that really enlightens us on what the student experience is in this COVID-19 pandemic. So I'd like to recognize Catalina Cifuentes, the chair of the California Student Aid Commission, Patrick Perry, director of policy research and data at CSAC, Jessica Muldeff, research specialist at CSAC, Dr. McCall Kurlander, UC Davis School of Education, and Dr. Sherry Reed, UC School of Education. This team has been amazing in providing the information and gathering and providing the analysis and insights you're going to hear in just a moment. I also want to thank, we have several commissioners on the line who are joining us, and for their continued support for developing critical research such as what you're going to observe today. This helps us better address the needs of students and really understand what is happening and how they can best leverage financial aid so that they can succeed in college. As you may know, last fall, the Student Aid Commission issued a report called the Student Expense and Survey. And with these findings, we learned, in fact, that students were struggling a great deal, especially when it came to basic needs. We knew that those basic needs, such as housing and food insecurities, were affecting their ability to continue in their college studies and to ultimately graduate. What we learned underscored that students were struggling then. And now with COVID-19, and students' lives have been completely upended by the seemingly never-ending virus, We wanted to launch a new survey to learn more about what they're experiencing in this moment in time. So the commission today is releasing the findings of one of the largest surveys in the country, and it documents the impact of COVID-19 on students and their families. The survey provides invaluable data and insight directly from the students about their experiences during this time in the spring, the summer, and also in the fall. What CSAC, in partnership with the UC Davis Education Lab, surveyed students throughout California who submitted financial aid applications to the Student Aid Commission. This is a really large group of students. And they are all students who intended college enrollment this 2021 academic year. But beyond the data, thousands of students answered open-ended questions about their personal experiences. Their responses tell the real story. They tell the real story about their worry, their fear, and their uncertainty about the future. This is really poignant, and this is helping us understand the real situation behind the numbers. So coupled together, I think you're going to gain some incredible insights about students and will help us in the future determine how we can develop strategies and policies and programs to better address their needs in this COVID-19 environment. As the largest administrator of financial aid in the nation, the California Student Aid Commission is dedicated to serving the needs of our diverse students in the state, especially during this crisis. And we commit to doing everything we can to address the barriers to completion in good times and in bad. So I would now like to turn it over to the Student Aid Commission Chair, Catalina Cifuentes, who has a few welcoming remarks to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Garcia, and thank you to the team that Marlene just introduced. Thank you, all of you, for being on this webinar today. This information you're going to receive today is powerful, and we want you to take this information not just as reference, but as a call to action. What can we do? How can we improve what's happening to our students? When COVID-19 hit and everything going on with our racial justice movements, so many of our families and our communities they're enduring not only emotional distress, but financial distress. I've personally had to work with many students that are contemplating, do I go on to college? Do I take a gap year? Some of them started working and started doing, Instacart and other types of services that they could get a job to help their families. And so our greatest fear on the commission and our state is that we lose these students and that the academic journeys are now changed as a result of COVID and what's going on. And so how do we support our students? How do we continue this work and ensure that they have what they need? We all know education is the most powerful thing for our nation. It is the best equalizer for our students. And when you look at what's happening, the positions, what are the most valuable positions right now? We're talking medical industry, tech industry. Those positions and those jobs are going to require some type of higher education, some type of certificate, not just a high school diploma, although we'll continue in K-12. For those of you on the call today that are in K-12, we're going to continue to push high school diplomas, but we all know the reality is our students are going to need more than just a high school diploma to continue and help California's economy recover. So our campuses at K-12, higher ed, they've been transformed. Our students are having to make decisions that they should never have to decide, do I go to work full time to help so my family's not homeless, to do I continue my college education? And I think in order for us to move, how do we address it? And not just admire the problem, but how do we address it? It's really hearing their voices. And so I'm hoping today you'll not only get to hear from students, but you'll actually receive data that shares what the need is and understanding their current situation and how can we maybe come together by streamlining some of the services we offer as a state and really work together for our students and we don't lose them. I primarily work in a community that a majority of my students are first generation, and I'm already starting to see what's happening with students not doing their intent to register, and we're worried. And so this is definitely a call to action and a call for all of you on this webinar we'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, to do work on this together. So thank you so much for being here today. We want to thank you, our panelists ahead of time, and definitely our students. And together we will continue to help our California students achieve and succeed. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to our Executive Director, Marlene Garcia.
Okay, I think at this point we're ready to turn it over to Patrick Perry, who will share the survey results with us.
Thank you, Marlene and Chair Cifuentes. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for being on today. We are going to follow the following webinar agenda. I'm going to start here with an overview of the survey that was just conducted. I'm going to then go into the key findings for the two subgroups that were surveyed specifically, that being current college students and high school graduates. I'm going to talk a little bit about the survey responsiveness and representativeness of the survey. And then finally, we will segue to our student panel today, who I think is going to give you some great insight from how students are coping and struggling these days. First of all, this project was a joint project between the California Student Aid Commission and the UC Davis School of Education. I wanted to greatly thank Dr. McCall Kurlander and Dr. Sherry Reed for their part and role in this. We had a short timeline to put this together and a short timeline to do the analysis so that this would remain timely information for all of us. And so great thanks goes out to our partners there at UC Davis. The domain of students that were surveyed comes from the pool of students who submitted a FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, or the CADA, which is the California Dream Act application, in the most recent federal financial aid submission cycle. From this, two student groups were surveyed specifically: students from the graduating class of 2020 high school seniors, and students who are currently enrolled in higher education in California from all the segments: the community college segment, CSU, UC, private nonprofits, and even private for-profit institutions. The surveys were segmented as to their particular audience. High school seniors were given 20 questions. Currently enrolled students were given 32 questions. The survey was designed not to be a lengthy survey. Students generally could get through it in about 10 to 15 minutes. And the survey was conducted between the time period of May 15th and June 1 of 2020, so a little bit over 2 weeks. This was a time period that definitely was after, the full effects of COVID on students, and also after the CSU system had announced what their plans were going to be for fall. So students had some time to really digest what was going on with that and respond with how they were feeling at that moment in time. One of the things Marlene mentioned was the fact that we have a lot of qualitative information that we've gleaned from this survey. Throughout the survey, we gave students a number of opportunities to respond qualitatively with open response boxes, and we were greatly surprised at the openness of what they shared with us and the struggles that they shared with us. And so I'm going to put quite a bit of that contextual information in along with the numbers today. So the key findings for students who are currently in college. One student talked about how COVID has affected their particular financial situation. They say, "I may not have the financial means to support myself through the upcoming fall semester. I had planned on taking summer classes in order to catch up on credits, but because I no longer had any savings, I could not afford to." Another student responded when asked of the things that they were struggling with and dealing with: "My mental health, staying motivated and being able to focus at home. I've already fallen behind. I'm really worried that I won't meet my goals and I'll have to stay another year, which means spending more in tuition. This has been extremely hard." We have literally tens of thousands of responses in this survey that take on this type of form, telling us about how they're struggling and how they're coping with this. So the key findings for current college students. Specifically as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This first number was a pretty striking number. Over 70% of current students lost some or all of their sources of income as a result of the pandemic. So if you think about where students are employed, either at an institution or in the type of industries that got hit directly by COVID-19, it's no surprise that a vast majority of students lost some piece of their income, which greatly affects their ability to, pay for college, to pay for living expenses, to make their student contribution towards the total cost of education. Almost half of all students had their living arrangements change. So if you were a student at a college in spring of 2020, you may have been living in a dorm, you may have been living off campus. The college then transitioned into distance ed, and many students had their living arrangements change or disrupted. You were forced to move or move out, and this was an unexpected thing that many students had to deal with. A quarter of students dropped one or more courses in their spring 2020 college term. So amidst all of this disruption and the move to distance ed, there were a lot of wasted units and credits here as students dropped many courses. Fully a quarter of students dropped at least one or more courses, and eventually that will catch up. They are going to have to be made up at some point in the future. Looking forward and asking students about how they feel about fall, we asked them, have your plans changed? And plans can be a big, wide catch-all of things. They can include, where am I going to go to school? How am I going to pay for it? Am I going to have to work? Am I going to have to work full-time? Where am I going to live? Things like that. Over 80% of current students have either changed some aspect of their plans for fall 2020 or are still uncertain of their plans. So this is kind of something that says the level of disruption here from what students were originally planning on is great. Almost all students have had some piece of their plans disrupted. One good number that we found out of this, we were looking to see if there was going to be a wholesale stop out activity of students as far as fall goes. And from what we saw, their intentions were not to stop out. Only 2.4% of current students stated they do not plan to attend college in fall of 2020. And actually a third of these plan on completing their courses and their programs prior to fall of 2020. So really this number is more like 1.6%, which is good. Students are still showing that they want to continue on in college and persevere. However, current students, 15% of them said they were still unsure about where they were going to attend college in fall. So this is actually a decently high number. You've got a lot of students here who they're already in their institution and they're vested in attending this institution, but 15% of them are saying, I'm thinking about potentially making a change of institution where I'm going to attend in the upcoming fall. We asked students directly, prior to COVID-19, where were you attending? And then after COVID-19, where do you think you will be attending in fall of 2020? And you can see this distribution loses a few percentage points for all the major sectors here, but the main number that sticks out is the percentage of students who are saying, I don't know. And there's that 15% number. So you've got a lot of students who are in flux right now, and I'm sure as we get closer to fall, they're going to have to make a decision at that decision point gets closer. But as of now, you've got a huge group of students here who aren't quite sure where they're going to attend and maybe changing institutions or sectors. There are many reasons why plans have changed. High on the list is financial hardship. We asked why their plans are changing. 34% think they actually need to work more, and 21% think they need to attend a less expensive college. So if you're one of those 70% of students who lost some part of your income, you really have two things you have to deal with. I need to get more money, AKA I need to work more, or I need to reduce my expenses, which could include attending a less expensive college. Other stated reasons why students have had their plans change. 25% of them state they want to stay closer to family. Throughout a lot of the qualitative responses we got, the effect of COVID-19 goes far beyond that of just the student. It goes to their family and how their families have lost jobs and income. And it's very difficult for a student to leave and go off to college somewhere away from their family when their family's lives and finances have been disrupted. So we've got a lot of students saying now, I need to stay closer to my family. 22% state their plans are changing because they just don't want to take online classes. So a lot of responses about this is a delivery mode that is tough for me to learn in, or now I'm at home and I have a lot of disruptions at home, or the campus institutional supports are just not quite nearly as much as when I'm on campus and I don't want to take online classes. 15% of students state they would just like to take a break from college due to the pandemic. Now, colleges are going to be open in fall, and many of these students are going to attend, but given their druthers, 15% of them state, if I had the opportunity, I would just like to sit out for a period of time and take a break in college and wait for this pandemic to pass. We asked students about their awareness and use of aid, and the type of aid that colleges offered primarily were technology aid in the form of free or loaner laptops, or cash aid for living expenses, which primarily comes from institutional emergency grants and also money that came down from the CARES Act. 56% of students were aware that they could get a free or loaner laptop. Only a small portion of those students actually applied to get a free or loaner laptop, but for those who applied, 75% of them actually got one. For the students who were aware of living expense aid, 43% of students were aware that they could get an emergency grant or cash aid for living expenses. Of those, 39% of them applied for it, and of that 39%, 54% of them actually received some type of cash aid from their institution. Finally, all of this has led to a great deal of increase in student worry and anxiety levels. And we attempted to measure this for students, asking them a number of questions about how worried were you about this prior to COVID-19, and after COVID-19, how worried are you about it now? They told us that they have great deals of anxiety increases in their ability to pay for school. And if they are able to go to school, are they able to attend full time? Anxiety in their ability to meet their basic needs, and also maintenance of their own health and the well-being of themselves and also of their families. This chart actually shows a visual of how much that level of anxiety has increased for students. If you look at the top bar in each of the questions moving down the left column, concern about paying for tuition, housing, transportation, etc. And if you focus just on the pink part of it, the pink shows what percentage of students were very, very concerned about this aspect. And on the top bar, this is before COVID-19 hit. And you can see maybe 15 to 20% of students were very concerned about each of these aspects. After COVID-19, on that second bar, you can see how that pink portion of the bar has greatly increased. And for most of these, it's now anywhere between 40 and 70% of students are now greatly concerned about each of these aspects of dealing with being a student. Finally, Marlene mentioned some of the qualitative responses here. So I want to throw some commentary here that give great context to these numbers. The first one is a quote from a student who is also a mother and what she's having to deal with. She says, "My current challenge is being a mother and on top of being a student. I was able to go on campus to do my learning, free from distraction from my children. Now I am trying to find the time to do my classes solely online on top of taking care of children that were also enrolled in school and now homeschooling." One student stated, "I'm concerned about being unable to pay rent or for other educational expenses. This has added a lot of stress that is distracting me from my academic goals." A third student talks about the disruption to what they thought was going to be their timeline for getting through school. "Plans have definitely changed from a hopeful 2 years at a community college to transfer into a longer process. I lost my job, making it harder to fulfill needs. I dropped most of my classes to work at another job to help out more in my household." And then this fourth student really hits home what is the prioritization of things and where school fits into that. Student says, "My degree is important, but bills are not going to wait for me. I have to pay them." So really good insight from some students on what they're dealing with right now. And these are current college students. I'm going to hold for a second here and see if Dr. Kurlander or Dr. Reed want to add anything to this or have any questions that they'd like to take on.
Hello, yes, thank you, Patrick. This is a question that's come up and may come up again about whether there were differences that stood out for continuing students when disaggregated by year in school or by type of institution. And I just want to reassure you that we do intend to do some additional analysis to look at this, the timing of when this hit for students. That's not presented here today. And also that on the CSAC website, there will be data available to look at all of these responses by segment, specifically community colleges, CSUs, and UCs, and private institutions in California. I will just tell you, having looked at it, we do not see big differences across segments in responses to these questions, but all of those data will be available.
Okay, thank you, McCall. I'll continue on here. We will do the key findings for the part of the survey where we surveyed high school seniors. So I think you really have to feel for the high school seniors from the class of 2020. Not only did they have their senior year in high school interrupted and disrupted greatly, but now it's looking more and more like their freshman year in college will suffer the same fate. Students who in January or February had one set of plans about starting and going off to college had things greatly disrupted for them, and some of them dramatically as their family and home lives took on different flavors. One student who's a high school senior says, well, now I have to take care of my parents who have tested positive for COVID-19 and both of them losing their jobs. So now I have to go look for a job while taking care of them and my 3 siblings. It's a great change in expectation that occurred for that particular student. Another student says, at this point, we're barely able to afford food and having difficulty paying for the rent. My dad lost one of his 2 jobs, and the job he has now only gives him a very few hours. This happened after college commitments, so now I have a very different view about going off to college. Here are some of the key findings for high school seniors who were surveyed. 9% of high school graduates say they plan to delay their college enrollment. They were not necessarily saying that they're no longer going to go to college, but as a result of this, they plan on delaying their entry into college until some point later in the future, which, as many of us in higher ed know, this is a dangerous thing because there's going to be some portion of that group who eventually do not make it back into college because they have delayed. 33% expressed concern about attending college far from home or their families. Similar finding to the continuing college students. It's very difficult to go off to college when your family is in an emergency or crisis mode. We asked high school seniors the same set of questions. Where did you plan on going to college before COVID-19 hit? And now that it's hit, where do you plan on going to college? This one shows a little bit different distribution than the existing college students. This one is showing a greater percentage of students who are saying they intend to go to a community college than where they were originally intending to go previously. There's also a reduction of students who are going outside of California to go to college, and still a significant number of students who don't know where they want to go to college yet. We asked incoming first-year college students, what are your largest concerns? 82% of them are concerned about taking online classes. 73% are concerned about their personal financial situation, and another 71% are concerned about financial hardship that has gone on in their family as well. And once again, there are large increases in levels of student worry and anxiety over very similar things. This distribution is almost exactly the same one that we saw for the continuing students. Great increases in levels of anxiety for students. Finally, high school seniors, some of their open responses. My parents were so proud of me, and now they're just stressed because they don't know how we'll afford it. I feel like I'm drowning. This was supposed to be my fresh start, and now I don't even know if I should go. Another student states, I will not be able to move out and be free from distractions at home. Now I will have to stay at home, take care of siblings, and do all the household chores while still taking online classes. I'm thinking that I will have to take less units because of all the household responsibilities that are going to fall on me because I'm the oldest child. This from an undocumented student in their unique situation. I am an undocumented student already at a disadvantage financially, and finding scholarships is difficult. It's become much more uncertain how I will be able to pay for college because my mom is the only source of income and is no longer able to work as a janitor. I have seen the negative effects of this on my schoolwork. If COVID-19 continues into freshman year, I'm not sure how successful I will be in college. And then finally, something from a student who is pondering delaying entry. I'm debating to skip school for a couple of years, at least until my parents get back on their feet. I really want to get a degree in music. However, my family is priority. Anything you want to add here, Dr. Kurlander or Dr. Reed, as far as questions go?
I will just add that folks are asking really important questions about further disaggregation by race, ethnicity. I will also add by income levels, and that is work that we hope to be able to do in the coming months, to be able to look at this disaggregated. It does involve some creative matching between these data and other segmental data. So we are going to be looking into the possibility of doing that.
Okay. So the survey response we were very pleased with. It's a very, very large sample size. We sent out about 150,000 surveys to high school seniors and got back a little over 16,000 responses in that 2-week period of time, response rate of 11%. We sent out 500,000 surveys to continuing college students. There were a little over 61,000 respondents, a response rate of 12.3%. So all in all, we have over 75,000 student responses here. The qualitative responses are also enormous, and we've yet really just to scratch the surface of them. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. And as Dr. Kurlander said, we're going to be doing a lot of matching of this data with other data sets to try and get other important crosstabs. As far as the representativeness of the responses, they were generally representative by educational segment, by student age, and by year of enrollment in college. We were slightly overrepresented in response from female students and California DREAM Act application filers, and respondents overall skewed towards students with lower average incomes and EFCs, which is good. We definitely wanted to get responses from that group so we could know what they were struggling with. Full technical appendices and also a distribution of all the responses to all of the questions is available to you online at csac.ca.gov survey 2020, including a nice report that we've put out on this. As mentioned earlier, we will continue to do research over the summer and the fall on this data set. And we will continue also mining and categorizing all of these written qualitative responses, which really gave us great insight into what's really going on for students. I'll leave you with this. From a high school senior survey respondent, a very poignant response, which talked about the struggles of the family, but also still the fact that there is a lot of hope. No one thinks that they will have a global health crisis in their lifetime. No one thinks they will see their mother cry at seeing a loss in their retirement that questions the future. No one hears their parents talking worriedly through the walls, discussing college plans for them and for younger siblings. We attempt to see through their worrisome glances over their laptops, having researched tuition, housing, and added costs. We've seen them compare prices for anything more times than we can count. We support our parents, our guardians, by reassuring them that it will pass and we'll have a future just as exciting, just as ample with opportunities. I think that's a great segue for us to move now to our student panel, and I'll turn it back over to Judith. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So now we'll be hearing from our student panelists so that we can really put a face to this experience and this data. I'll be calling on our student panelists, and we'll be starting with Yvette Ramirez from UC Santa Barbara.
Hi everyone, my name is Yvette Ramirez and I recently graduated from UC Santa Barbara. As we all know, my last undergraduate quarter was at the university was impacted by COVID-19. So this meant that all of my classes were held virtually, that my family members' working schedules and responsibilities were altered, and that my needs changed. So I moved back to my hometown in Sacramento, where I helped care for my nieces and nephews. I also helped to care for my handicapped and ill father. I contributed to family expenses, such as groceries. Yet one of the greatest challenges I faced was balancing communicating with my family and also balancing my classwork at the same time. Moreover, this was my first time that I had been home in my hometown since I had moved for college 4 years ago. So a lot had changed, including the place where we had lived. So along with the emotional and social adjustments, financial burdens also weighed heavily on my mind and on the minds of my peers. So with the pandemic came a huge loss of work hours for me, and I began to worry about paying for rent for the apartment that I had left in Santa Barbara. So even though I wasn't living in Santa Barbara, I still had to figure out a way to pay rent. So that worried me. And I found myself relating to a collective of students I mentored who shared these same feelings from unmet needs, including one mentee who will not be returning to college this upcoming fall quarter due to the challenges presented by COVID-19. So as a Latinx first generation and income eligible student, my success at my university is largely influenced by the amount of resources available to me. My formal education is an opportunity for me to grow as a student and as a person. It provides hope to positively contribute to the underserved communities that molded a part of who I am today. I hope that more mental, social, academic, culturally competent, and financial resources may be provided that are easily accessible to students. These resources are needed in order to endure these challenging times and grow into positive forces for our communities. Therefore, the data you just saw is much more than just numbers and quotes from students. These are real students. We are real students. We are real people who will impact our futures, and it takes all of us to ensure our success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvette, for that powerful statement. So next we have Humberto Jaramillo, who just graduated high school and is working towards attending Cal State San Bernardino in the fall. Humberto.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank the coordinators of this event for allowing me to be here and be part of this experience. Now, I know I'm not alone when I say that the COVID-19 pandemic has created new challenges in my goals for a higher education, as well as it has shined a light on many challenges that come pre-existing to the pandemic. COVID-19 has definitely introduced me to a different style of learning, a more independent and rigorous method, which I was not used to. Now, although we did use technology daily when we would attend our on-campus studies, we had our instructor right there beside us in case we struggled with anything or we had any trouble. Now, through distance learning, yes, we can always email our instructor. However, it's more difficult to explain them through a typed message, and the response times are sometimes very inconvenient. To add on to that, the area where I live, it's a rural area. So I have to do all this through my mobile hotspot because the prices for regular internet are very expensive for very little internet. Adding on to this, I am transitioning from high school to college amidst this condition, and it's a hassle. A lot of files have to be exchanged, and I couldn't really go down to my guidance counselor's office during lunch. Thankfully, she is amazing and has been able to continue guiding me through the process online. Now, COVID-19 has made my household's income fluctuate irregularly. Being a construction worker and many places being closed down definitely reduces the work options. Furthermore, many people don't want work getting done in their homes anymore due to health concerns. So the income fluctuation, however, it does date back to even before the pandemic. You know, being undocumented, unemployment has never been an option. Even now, if we have a health concern or anything, we can't rely on unemployment. And now with the work options being limited, whenever there's little work, we just have to rough it out and get by. Now, one expense that has definitely increased is food. With my siblings and I no longer receiving breakfast and lunch at schools, the food at home that is being consumed is a lot more. To add on to that, food prices have certainly gone up. I speak from personal experience when I say that the support such as schools providing breakfast or the financial support such as schools giving us EBT cards, it's great help. About 4 to 5 weeks ago, my family and I, we were short for food, and the district at that point had issued EBT cards to be used for food purposes. And that really got us out of that struggle. I don't think how we would have gotten through without EBT card. And also, another thing that COVID-19 certainly does is it makes me concerned, not just with my personal life, but also educational life. Even before COVID, I was sort of troubled about achieving my goal of pursuing a higher education. I would ask myself the literally $1,000 question: how would I afford college? And thankfully, the financial aid I will be receiving will cover most, if not all, of my college tuition, which is a great relief to me because now all of my out-of-pocket expenses will be for transportation and food. However, I feel it's at times like these, in these times of confusion, these times of struggle and hardship, that students need this financial aid more than ever. Because personally, I have no idea how I would have gotten through or even decided to continue with college through all this without the financial aid. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Humberto, for sharing your story. Next, we have Jesus Alexander Gomez from Fresno Pacific University. Jesus.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesus Alexander Gomez. I'm currently a junior political science major attending Fresno Pacific University. I'm from the small city of Porterville, also a first-generation student and DACA recipient. The COVID-19 pandemic has not directly affected me greatly as it has to other students, but as the 2020-2021 academic year is coming close to a start, many uncertainties arise as the virus continues to grow, and the little remains of normalcy and lifestyle begin to dissolve. Some of my worries include the thoughts of what will occur if my father, who's the main provider at home, gets sick at work and has to manage even more financial risks. And although I always have an optimistic overview of my college life, it matters how this pandemic will come in between students and their journey through higher education. I'm the oldest sibling in a household of 5, and about 3 weeks ago, my father came home and did his best to explain something he knew would cause worry among our family. Someone at his workplace had contracted the virus, and they were now going to miss work. The news immediately worried us, since there was a chance that my father may have come in contact with that worker. After discussing and making sure that we were all at home taking appropriate measures and practicing good social distancing practices, we stopped and worried less. Later, after my parents went to get tested and made sure it was all right, results came back negative and we were relieved. Although this momentary scare was over with, I still think about what it would mean for us if my father did get sick. For my family, it'd be tough with the bills and other daily tasks since my father is the only one in the family that drives and has a full-time job. For me, it would more than likely mean that my financial struggles with college expenses would increase, and as a result of that, the cost may be that I may have to stop attending my institution. Besides having the pandemic, I believe students also have to endure having our current fast-shifting society and all the political turns that bring clutter and angst to the mind. Starting off a new academic semester usually means a fresh start with a clear mindset to most, but this time it means having to wonder and worry about what ups and downs there will be, and whether the external factors interfering with the student's academic pursuits are worth the burden of managing the overall situation. All students can strive for success, but we can't achieve the desired results if we have to suppress our ambition as a result of this dark time. The last weeks of spring semester, I felt as if my efforts to push myself to be motivated were not enough, and I heard the same sentiment from most of my other peers. I wanted to get away from the mass amounts of media that didn't help, heaps of information that only helped to illustrate 2020 as this inevitable tragedy. But I felt going away from this media was only at the expense of me not being informed. I allowed my stress to build up and cause worry, which in reality was just a producer of distractions from my academic priorities. I eventually found strategies to keep myself focused and productive. However, I was not satisfied with the results of my work considering my mindset. Considering this experience last spring, I do worry if it's an issue that will persist this upcoming semester and how I'll be able to manage it amidst the other priorities that I also must take care of. As a returning student, I do understand that most of the concerns and risks that there are in choosing to continue attending. I recognize it's different for every student. The quality of the courses may be different, perhaps not worth the financial costs. Students question how their online or face-to-online hybrid courses will change the effectiveness of their learning. For those that are struggling throughout other obstacles besides COVID-19, thinking about returning to college could be the last thing on their mind, or perhaps the most difficult since it's something they'll have to give up as a result of the pandemic's impact. While the weight of the odds may be bad and look unfortunate for us, or many of us, I hope that students can challenge those odds and make their academic pursuits prevail. I'm thankful that there are surveys such as this one that allow for students to share their stories and insights about our different situations. It is very important to understand that there are various angles to this issue, and I believe this survey was able to highlight many of those angles. Thank you for your time. I appreciate having the opportunity to share my story and my thoughts over how COVID-19 has affected our students and our experience with higher education.
Thank you so much, Jesus. So next we'll be hearing from Elijah Gerard, who just completed his time at Crafton Hills College and is now attending, or will be attending, Sonoma State.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Elijah Gerard. I come from a very small town in San Bernardino County. The town is called Redlands. And I've just graduated from a community college, Crafton Hills College, with an associate's in anthropology. And my hope is to attend Sonoma in the fall. What has been difficult for me to explain, and what I've tried to explain, is that as young people, we feel a constant need to be extraordinary. We're told always that jobs are becoming more scarce and that college degrees are becoming less valued, and that we'll have to work twice as hard and be twice as successful in order to make sure that we'll have the same opportunities that the people before us had. And so when you come from a place like San Bernardino, and when you're an undocumented student, or when you come from the community college system, you feel all of those pressures even more. And so when I was in school, I worked to make sure that I was constantly as involved as possible. And so I was the student trustee in my district and the student trustee for the state of California. My mother had to retire from her job and move back to her hometown in the Bay Area. And so I took on two jobs. I worked as a lifeguard and a swim instructor at the YMCA, and I worked as a tutor on my campus. I paid for my own apartment. I took a full workload, and it felt like I was doing what was necessary, and all of this pressure was helping me to grow and helping me to succeed. And then when COVID struck, it was like everything that I had done was pointless. And so both of my jobs were working closely with young people and the elderly. They both immediately closed. I lost all sources of income. My county, San Bernardino, was one of the last counties to protect tenants from eviction. And so I was threatened with eviction. I followed my mother back to her hometown here in the Bay Area. And so I moved 600 miles from my residence. I have spent hours on the phone with medical supply companies because on top of all of these issues, I'm also a type 1 diabetic. And so I have tried to get insulin supplies and medications sent to a new address without being able to leave my house, because as an immunocompromised person, I am constantly fearful and worried about what is going to happen in the future. And so all of these opportunities that students are missing in the end add up to an overwhelming sense of fear. And I think that this survey did a great job of trying to get that across. But I don't know if it's possible to understand if you're not experiencing it. And so yesterday, Sonoma State, the college that I'm hoping to transfer to, sent me an email saying that my housing was guaranteed for next semester. But on that same day, I was told that Harvard did not have the resources to have online education. And so as an immunocompromised person, I can't seem to wrap my head around the fact that it's going to be safe for me here, but that Harvard couldn't afford to do it. I am fearful that if I do not constantly make sure that I'm on top of my game, I'm going to miss a year of my education. I'm going to be behind. I'm going to lose opportunities. I'm going to lose scholarships. I'm going to lose connections. What students are feeling right now is not like this is going to end. I'm 20 years old. This is my first major crisis. I was 2 years old when 9/11 happened. I don't remember the 2008 financial crisis, but this doesn't feel to me like something we are working to move past. And so I think that as I'm trying to work in my home, a home where there's 2 people in every room, where to get onto this Zoom lecture, I had to wake up an hour earlier to make sure I would have this room to myself. I don't know how I'm going to continue to be educated. I don't know how I'm going to work if I represent the 1 in 5 people in this country who is chronically ill and fearful of if I can do a job or afford to lose this much income while protecting my health. And so I think what we need to remember is that all of the students who have spoken today are incredible and are determined and feel constant pressure and fear, but that the students who have spoken today also are lucky to have had this opportunity. And so if you think that what we're saying sounds bad, somewhere in this country, in this state, there are people who cannot be on this webcam. And so I hope that as we are forming legislation to make sure students have a place to sleep at night and are going to have a sustainable income, I hope that we're remembering that we are fearful and that we hope to see change. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Elijah, and thank you to all the students who shared their stories. As mentioned, these are, some of our student panelists who were able to share their stories, and we just want to continue to hear from every other student. These are not unique situations. And if we can bring it back to the previous slide, Patrick, we do want to hear a few words from our Executive Director, Marlene Garcia.
Thank you, Judith. I am so touched, moved by our student leaders on this panel and their stories and the courage it took to share their stories, each one of them very honest and very real. I think that this is what it's going to take, because at the end of the day, it is about you, it is about students, and that we have to remember we are dealing with an unimaginable situation that just 6 months ago, we never believed we'd be in this situation, but we are. But with the resilience and the leadership and the commitment by students, by college students who are pursuing their dreams, I want you to know that we're here with you, and we're here to advocate for students. And we are going to get through this, and we'll be talking about this for decades to come, about what it felt like to be in a place we had never experienced and to be able to come out of it. From darkness comes light. We will do this, and we will do it together. And I want to assure you that the higher education leadership, that we at the Student Aid Commission and our amazing commissioners at the Student Aid Commission will do everything in our power to address the very real needs that no one ever imagined we would be planning for. But we will do this. So thank you again to our student panelists. Your stories are real, and you are speaking for so many hundreds of thousands of students, and they, I'm sure, are appreciative of your words.
Thank you so much, Marlene. So, Patrick, if you'd like to chime in as well, but now we'll be taking questions if anyone has any. I know our colleagues and teams have been answering the questions on the Q&A box, but I'll leave it up to Patrick and his team to take on any questions they'd like to answer verbally. So please feel free to include your questions and comments on the Q&A box. They're all very important. They are really good questions and very helpful in terms of starting a discussion. So we appreciate your input. So Patrick, I will hand it over to you to see if there are any questions that have come up.
Yeah, I'll defer to McCall. I actually can't see them at the moment.
I think we have answered most of the questions as they've come in. I'll just review some in case folks aren't looking at the Q&A box. Again, first and foremost, I just have to say a lot of people are just, because our student panelists may also not see the Q&A box as they're speaking, and just want to make sure you know that there have just been wonderful responses to all of your testimonies and how powerful they are. And so just want to make sure you know that. And that is what an important part of this session that those testimonies have been. We've had some questions about the survey, again, with the intention for future analyses and disaggregation by subgroups. We also had some questions about the representativeness of the survey, and just want to let you know that that already posted is a technical appendix that compares respondents to the overall survey population. And otherwise, just lots of professionals tuning into this with lots of feedback on sort of what more can be done. And Marlene has already addressed some of that. I think we're all eager to partner and work on next steps and informing institutions and state policymakers on the great need of our students who are really struggling at this time.
Judith, I would like to respond to one of the questions. The question came from Evelyn Keogh. Why can't we eliminate tuition? One of the things we discovered when we did our Sears expense and resources report last fall is that cost of living in California is really high. And one of the biggest challenges for students is paying for the basic living expenses, especially for community college students. The tuition is not the bulk of the problem. The living expenses are the big challenge, and they're the challenge for students at four-year institutions and at two-year institutions. So we have spent the past 9 months looking at how we can restructure Cal Grant and how we can do it in such a way that we leverage every existing resource that we have available to us from the federal and the state, and even from some of our state agencies, and how we might better be able to close that total cost of attendance gap, and not just look at the cost of college's tuition, but rather the full cost of college. So we will continue down that path, and there's a lot of interest in the work that has been done by the Student Aid Commission and the Cal Grant Work Group, which submitted a report that you can find on our website called the Cal Grant Modernization Report. And it includes a proposal that we believe better addresses cost of attendance. And in the long run, that's going to provide more resources for students to cover their basic needs.
Thank you, Marlene. We also have a question from Diane that says, what would the students like to hear from us at the time? What would they like to hear from us that would be supportive? And so I'll leave that up to any of our student panelists if they'd like to answer that question.
Sorry if anyone else wants to respond also. But I think that's an incredible question, but I also don't really know. I wish I had a good answer, and if another student does have a great answer, I think we don't need to see plans that aren't falling through. We don't need to see the issues, we need to see solutions. And so I think that most of the students who spoke today talked about the struggles of the media and of seeing negativity. And yesterday, when it was announced that undocumented students who are not attending in-person classes can face deportation, these sorts of issues, I think, are things that students don't need compounded on top of them. But yeah, that's a great question. I hope someone else has a great answer.
Thanks, Elijah. Do any of our other student panelists want to answer that question? And what do you want to hear from us that would be supportive at this time?
I think I'd like to give it a try. Sort of adding on to what Elijah mentioned is we want to see more on the more efficient way to addressing these problems, because many times certain solutions that are taken, they could be better. And personally, I think that we just need, as students, we just need reassurance. We need that support and motivation to keep pushing us through our goal of pursuing a higher education. So definitely reassurance and motivation.
Thank you, Humberto. Do any other student panelists want to answer that question, or we can move forward with other questions on our Q&A box?
I can add a little bit onto that as well. So I'll just go ahead and say that, first of all, I don't speak for all students necessarily, but just from my own experiences and other students I communicate with, I do also agree that it's important for us to feel reassured and feel supported. And for me, a lot of that looks like being mindful that students have different identities outside of just being a student. Just like as you heard from all of us panelists right now, some of us, we're children of working class families, or we have our own health complications that we have to worry about. We also have our own financial struggles that we have to worry about. So I think just trying to present solutions or strategies that are working towards solutions, because we're all kind of aware of the problems. We know that this isn't great. We know that the situation is not ideal. So, I think having this data to support us and knowing and putting that information out there that this is not ideal, but then also having strategies on how we can work to improve the situation for students, and for students that are underserved as well, not just one type of student, but all types of students, and trying to be more mindful of different backgrounds and all those different identities that make us the students that we are, that add to these difficulties as well. So yeah, that's what I would like to add.
Thanks, Yvette. Jesus Gomez, would you like to add anything?
I also resonate with many of the things that the other panelists said. And yeah, like them, I only want people to keep telling us that it'll be fine, we'll get past this. I personally would say that the focus remains on the positive outlook of the future. Right now, I've only seen that the media focuses so much on painting 2020 and maybe the upcoming year as only tragedies, and I don't think that's helpful at all, especially for students, because they're going to be concerned about that and not about their academics. So I think just keeping everything on a positive note, even if it's tough, is what's going to motivate students. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you all for chiming in. Now we have a question for Executive Director Marlene Garcia. What plans does the Commission have to disseminate these results more widely than the education community?
Thank you for that question. That's really important. And we have actually developed a beautiful report that summarizes all of the initial findings that is going to be available on our website, but we will also be pushing it out to the broader community to let people know, to provide this insight of what the real feelings and experiences are by the students. It includes a lot of the data points that you heard today, and also provides a lot of the quotes that you also heard Patrick Perry read today. So we're hoping that this will be this will stimulate ongoing conversation so that we design the right solutions for what is really affecting students on the ground. So we will be actively sharing this report and the data broadly and widely.
Thank you, Marlene. So we'll continue to look through the questions, but I want to leave it up to McCall and Sherry to see if they noticed any patterns or any questions they'd like to verbally answer.
Just to say that we appreciate all the feedback and the partnership, and we're happy to continue to get more of it. We do intend to work with these data to be able to track students. These are, again, students' perceptions and their plans for the fall, but we very much plan to track what actual enrollment looks like and be able to tie it back to students' concerns and worries. And so just continue to tune in for additional work in this area. We also are going to try to code the tens of thousands of open responses that we heard from students, as you saw this morning. Those are very powerful, and we really want to, there's a lot we didn't know how to ask, and so we very much are trying to understand in students' own words what their challenges are and how to be able to summarize that information for the broader public.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we will continue to try to answer these questions via the Q&A box. Any questions that we cannot get to, we will provide an FAQ list next to our recorded version of this webinar on our website. So please feel free to check us out. For those who have been asking if the PowerPoint presentation is available, it is available at the moment, and that is at www.csag.california or ca.gov/survey2020. We can also include that in the chat box for all attendees to see, but you're more than welcome to check out all the data and documents that were gathered as a result of this. So with that being said, I will turn it back to Patrick just to thank us all. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate your input and questions. And I'll leave it up to McCall and Sherry to continue to answer these questions on the Q&A box. I still see a few.
Sure, Judith. Marlene, did you want to address the Cal Grant modernization question?
I can get that on the Q&A box.
Okay. Well, like we said, we will continue working on this. The reports will be out on our website. We will continue their dissemination, but you can go download all of the materials that we have to date on our website, csac.ca.gov/survey2020. Thank you very much for attending today, and have a great day.